Thank you.
Great. Good evening, everyone. This is the continuation of the public hearing involving the proposed 40B project at 648 to 652 Canton Avenue in Milton. All the members of the board are here. I see that our planning consultant, Judy Barrett, is also with us tonight. Our trusted lieutenant, Beverly Sutton, is here. And I also see Mr. Corcoran. I don't know if anyone else is on the screen. I see there are many other participants, but is Mr. Schomer on board?
He's on board right now. There's an awful lot of his team. I don't know.
Evening, everybody.
Good evening. So I just introduced everyone and sort of opened the meeting, Mr. Schomer. I received from Mr. Schomer yesterday an email with what seemed likely to be voluminous attachments, which I've not had a chance to even look at yet, with some more recent studies, changes, groundwater studies, draft concrete construction management plan, a whole bunch of materials that were just received sometime yesterday. And as I said, I'm sure the other members of the board probably haven't had a chance to even look at them either. Anyway, Jesse, you probably want to say something about where we are and what you propose.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good evening, Chairman Hurley and members of the board. First of all, on behalf of the development team, I'd like to apologize to you that we did not make the filing deadline of last Tuesday, I believe it was. The processing the information for the drainage study just took a little bit longer than we had anticipated. The plans were substantially completed last week, but the drainage report was not, and there was an outside chance that some changes to the drainage plan could have resulted in changes to the site civil plans, which could have also resulted in changes to the other disciplines, the architecture and the landscaping plan. That didn't turn out to be the case. So the plans were completed. They were filed yesterday evening, and again, I apologize. I think it's regrettable that it took us an extra week, but I think that extra time was well spent. I think they got it right and crossed all their T's, dotted all their I's to make sure that every plan was coordinated with each other so that this is a definitive submission for the board members and the peer reviewers and members of Attorney Corcoran's team. Just by way of further explanation, the plan set that was filed yesterday includes fully revised architectural, engineering, and landscape plans, as well as an updated drainage report, which corresponds with site plan changes and infrastructure changes that were made based on recommendations of Sean Reardon. And for example, those included removal of the proposed porous asphalt and replacement with subsurface storage tanks, changes to the storage tanks, as well as other changes to the site, specifically changes to the secondary emergency access to accommodate Milton Fire Chief's concern about grounding out his largest fire truck. Additionally, the updated plans include modification of the design of the buildings, consolidation of some of them into a single building in the center of the site, which was a recommendation of Mr. Bomer. And both of those peer reviewers also had recommended that we create a circular driveway to enable better circulation through the site for fire trucks, emergency vehicles, and residents. And that was also done. The updated submission also includes, as you mentioned, Chairman Hurley, a construction management plan. The landscaping plan now includes a tree protection plan. And there were also updated auto turn analysis from our traffic and safety engineers showing the movement of the Milton fire apparatus through the site, as well as response letters from our consultants to comments that were made by the peer reviewers and their feedback. And at the same time that I sent the updated plans to the board members last night and to Attorney Corcoran last night, I also sent them to the peer reviewers so that they could have access to them and get started with their review of those. Finally, the last submission was an updated waiver list, which was it was only minor modifications to that, and I highlighted those in the submission. They have to do only with dimensional particulars of the project, and as I said, they are minor changes. In terms of path forward, my suggestion, and I did extend this offer in my covering letter last night, would be that we extend the deadline to close the public hearing on this for 5 weeks, which would be until the 11th of January. That would give us a little bit of breathing room for the board members, the peer reviewers, and members of the public to review these updated plans as we move towards the conclusion of this hearing. And in terms of when the next hearing would be, I would leave that up to the board members in terms of how much time you would need to review these plans before we come back and offer a full presentation on them. That having been said, our team is here tonight, and we are prepared to offer a initial presentation if that would please the board.
Yeah, I have to turn to Judy, who I don't see in the picture anymore. But I mean, to some extent, when we have the next hearing is a function of when the peer reviewers can complete, a careful study of all the new material that's been submitted, and also that Mr. Corcoran and his people have an opportunity to do the same. So, I mean, we could set it for 2 weeks. I don't know that that's enough time, but we could certainly try. But again, I have to defer to Judy on this. Do you think that 2 weeks is enough time for the peer reviewers for the town to carefully review all of this material and be in a position to discuss and opine 2 weeks from tonight?
Well, Sean is usually able to turn things around. The more precarious thing I think is Cliff's schedule. But I would be, it's hard for me to imagine that they couldn't at least have written comments back to you. What I can't tell you is how quickly you would get them before the meeting.
Okay.
Because I just know they have other work. So, I mean, 2 weeks probably is fine, but I just need you all to bear with me. I don't have their schedules. So, I mean, I could try to text them both right now and ask.
I think we should probably set it for 2 weeks. I'm really reluctant to put it off any further than that, and just we'll deal with as much information as we have available to us that night, and hopefully it will be everyone that's on board and able to participate. But I think we should move forward. And so, Judy, if you could just maybe get back to me over the next couple of days and give me a sense of availability as well as ability to carefully study the materials, and that would be very helpful.
Yes.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that, on the subject of timing? Ned, do you have any thoughts?
I've got to go let my wife in the door. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I had to go get coffee, so my coffee was more important than you for a minute, Mr. Chair. But
I'll ask the other board members. Mike, Ted, how do you feel about it? Is 2 weeks the right period? Is it too little, too much?
I mean, I think we should say 2 weeks. And then if we have to appear in 2 weeks and learn that maybe the peer reviewers haven't had the chance to thoroughly review, then we'll push it out. But I think we should keep our foot on the gas.
We can deal with that. We can deal with that, Ben.
Mr. Chair, I'm back. I would concur. I would think that at least the proponent could start and give a detailed overview of the plans. I would tend to think that you would need more than one evening to thoroughly vet everything with the peer reviewers and our information. So I think you're going to need at least 2 nights. So I would suggest starting in 2 weeks would be helpful, and then probably move on to the following week.
So 2 weeks from tonight, what's that date?
14.
14.
I don't know how much enthusiasm there's going to be for having a hearing on December 21st,
I
but
agree with that. Yeah, tough week.
21st is a challenge for everybody. Especially those of us that are running training sessions that night for
Right.
other towns.
well, that to me, that then it just underscores, I think, the importance of getting something underway 2 weeks from tonight. And we can figure out where we are at the conclusion of that and go from there rather than try to predict into the future. But I think we need to get started 2 weeks from tonight in earnest and cover all of the issues in the day. Jesse, I think it might be helpful if everyone else agrees with me, but it might be helpful if we just got from you tonight or your people tonight, just sort of an overview of the changes, maybe a 10 or 15 minute kind of recap of what you've done and what's different and really it's for the board certainly, but I think also members of the public might like to hear what's going on and what the changes are in the anticipation of a hearing 2 weeks from tonight. So if you would mind doing that with your folks, I think that would be helpful tonight.
Good, I think so too.
Mr. Schomer, can I interrupt just briefly?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we do have Chief Madden from the Milton Fire Department here. We had spoken at a previous hearing about getting him in to kind of clarify some of the questions that the board had around his department's needs. And I think we agreed to get him in and out at the top of the meeting. Would it be possible for Chief Madden to be elevated?
Sure, that's fine. I didn't realize he was here, so that's great, Tim.
I didn't know it was Chris Madden was Chief Madden, so I'm sorry.
That's no, not a problem, Bev. But if you can elevate him, and then I know the
yeah,
board had some specific questions, especially related to the secondary access on Mergewood Drive. So he's available to answer those questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Hi, everybody. I apologize. Actually, my meeting, the Fire Station Building Committee meeting that happens every other Tuesday night, was canceled for tonight. So I'm available for as long as you need.
Well, we're happy to have you, Chief. Thank you for joining us. I guess really just from an overall standpoint, and I'll defer to my fellow board members on this, but I'd just like to get your sort of take on fire safety issues generally as it relates to this proposed development, issues that you see, whether they've been addressed to your satisfaction, how you would deal with this secondary access. I'd just like to get an overview. I mean, fire safety is an important issue for us, given the nature of this development. And so I'd just like to get your take on the plans and how you view it from a fire safety standpoint.
Sure. So I've had the opportunity to look at this a couple of times, and I've had Lieutenant Vitaliano, who's the fire prevention officer here in the town, look at it with me, and we discussed a lot. And we also sent it to the Department of Fire Services, their plans review people, and we looked at it pretty in depth, and then we had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Schumer and his crew, and look at, and they made some changes, and I was, pleasantly surprised that when I looked at the revisions this morning, I clicked on them and got a good opportunity to look at them this morning. Most of everything that we asked for was put in there. So, access to all the buildings is there. Taking building 6 and 8 and joining it to 1 to make that a giant loop around those buildings prevents us from having to do those T turns, 3-point turns. So that access. So basically, we come into the property, go to whatever property we would have to, and then for us to leave, we take a left around building 6 and 8 and come back and go through there. So the use of Mergewood Drive would be very, very minimal on day-to-day operations. The only time you would ever have to use Mergewood Drive would be a major building fire. And so hopefully with the right fire prevention, making sure that everything's sprinkled and having the right, detection and warning devices in there, will keep the fires to a minimal. So I was pleasantly surprised at seeing this, that they got this out after our last meeting, to see that major change. The only other issues that I really see, and I would have to ask Mr. Schumer just to that connection for Mergewood Drive. I was trying to look at the plans and I got interrupted and I never went back to them to see what the slope was on that. Because I know it was extremely steep and it looks like it was flattened out a little bit, but I couldn't get the numbers exactly. And then the other part, the only other comment that I have is if we could make the corners a little bit wider. I'm looking at the turn radius for the ladder truck, And when we're turning into the property, we have to come into oncoming traffic. On the other side, it's a wide turn. So if we could make that a little bit wider, that would be great. Same thing with exiting out of the property onto Canton Ave. Looks like it kind of sweeps us into the middle of Canton Ave. So it would put us into oncoming traffic. And then, as we make these corners towards the end, it looks like it would put us into oncoming traffic. So if there was an emergency and people were trying to flee the building in cars or whatever, it would make it a little bit more difficult for us to navigate through cars and stuff. But if we could make these corners a little bit wider, that would be a lot more helpful. But other than that, those were our major concerns. There's access to each of the buildings, and I think they've overcome a lot of that. So we do have access to all of these buildings now.
Anybody have questions for the chief? Mr. Corcoran, any comments or questions?
I don't have any at this moment. Thank you.
Chairman
Jesse,
Hurley,
you
if
heard
I-
you heard the chief's suggestion about the sort of the turning radius at Canton Avenue. I imagine that's something that might be addressed.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at that. Regarding the issue of the slope of the secondary access, that is something that has changed, and I would if it please the board, I would turn it over to Phil Cordero from Allen and Major to discuss that a little bit.
Okay.
There he is.
Thank you, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major. Mr. Chairman, could I share my screen just to show a graphic for the chief?
Sure.
Great. And just confirm once you're able to see that. Yes?
I can see it.
Okay, great. So for the chief's benefit, this is the profile of the roadway as it intersects with Mergewood for the fire access lane. So the highlight, the edge of right-of-way of Mergewood Drive is right here. What we've done to address the chief's concerns is we have flattened out that slope at his request. We've developed a landing area coming off of Mergewood at about 1% with a vertical curve through there that maxes out to a slope of about 9.8%, which is significantly less than what we had before, and then have added in another vertical curve as you transition into the parking zone. And all of this is to make sure that his apparatus does not bottom out if he's entering or exiting the Mergewood. So we'll make sure that as part of any documentation, we provide this profile, which has that increased level of detail for confirmation from the chiefs that this will meet their needs. And as point of clarification, we are going to pave the entry road into Mergewood as part of our discussion with the chief, but we could have elected to utilize that grass surface, that grass paver, because we're now under that 10% threshold that was of concern before. But we're going to stick with the paved access way as requested. So happy to provide any additional detail on this profile as necessary for the board or the chief.
And Chief, do those changes or those points, do they satisfy your concerns on that score?
Yeah, I believe they do. Yeah. And the only other thing that we looked at is I know there's going to be an emergency access gate. We were talking about, who had access to that. And the only other thing would be to make sure, I know when it was grass, we talked about maintenance and care of it. And that will still have to hold true through the winter times with snow, just to make sure that it is always open in case anything were to happen.
That's correct. Yes, it'll be maintained as part of the site operations for snow removal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of quick questions for the chief. Just to follow up on that, 9.8 slope seems to be a pretty significant slope for a large fire truck over a short run of distance. You really think that that's adequate?
So forgive me, I'm trying to do the math here. I think, and I'm trying to think of the standard exactly in NFPA as it reads. And I believe it's 1 in 20, if I'm correct. And I'm trying to figure out, so 1 foot of rise for every, 20 I believe it's the 20 feet. So I'm trying to figure,
If I may, Chief, you're correct in terms of the code. I don't want to be telling you that, but it is 1 in 20, which is a 5% slope.
okay,
So the code reads that it's 1 in 5, unless a slope that's approved by the fire department having jurisdiction. So if you deem this slope adequate, it is an approvable slope under the fire code.
okay. This is new to me, so I would have to sit down with my fire prevention and a couple of the deputies and just to make sure and talk about it and make sure that it's adequate for us. So if I can take some time on that.
Sure. Chief, what I
Yeah.
would ask is it would be easier rather than have to have you come back again, if maybe you could do a letter to the board that addresses that issue.
Okay, I will.
Because I hate to drag you back just for that, but if you could tell us, up or down, and with some, reasons for your decision, that would be very helpful to everyone, I think.
It would also be helpful, Mr. Chair, if the chief could clarify his opinion regarding the need for secondary access.
Okay,
This is,
Okay.
this is a lot of units, a lot of buildings. Strikes me that secondary access would be necessary for a project of this scale.
I just operated under the assumption that was the case, but I'm happy to have the chief confirm that.
Thank you.
yes, I secondary access is important for us.
Okay. All right, well, with that, Mr. Schomer,
Can I
you
ask-
want to go back and just give us a sort of a quick down and dirty discussion of the changes and
Mr. Chairman,
Excuse
Yes.
me? Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, while Chief Mann's there, can I just ask one quick question?
oh, Ted, go ahead. I'm sorry. By all means.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I'm sorry if you've already covered this, but so that you were talking about the turning radius getting into the property from Canton Avenue, and the turning radiuses with a radii within internally in the development as shown on the plans, and considering the parking spaces on either side as you're making turns, those are all wide enough for your trucks?
So it shows in the graph that, yes, that is wide enough, but I was asking if they could maybe reduce those corners a little bit to make them a little bit softer, just so we wouldn't have to go into the oncoming traffic side of the lanes as much when we're taking those turns.
Okay, Chief, I was talking about inside the development, around the buildings where the turns are.
Yes, no,
Is
exactly.
that
yeah.
what you were talking about too?
Yes, yep.
Oh,
So
I'm
I'm looking
sorry.
at, when up near that, so I'm looking at the plan now. And when you see, we come all the way into the property. And if we were to take a right to get to Mergewood, you can see how it takes us into that oncoming traffic a little bit there. That is a concern, just to make sure, because if anybody was trying to leave that property while we're trying to get there, it just bottlenecks everything and kind of inhibits us from getting where we need to go. So I was looking to see just if we could get a little bit more room so it doesn't take us over into the oncoming lane as much.
Thank you very much.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Me,
Okay.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a follow-up on turning radii?
Sure.
And it would really relate to whether or not the proponent has done a similar turning study for access to and from Mergewood Road. Whether there's adequate turning radii to access the development through the proposed secondary access. Not only is Mergewood Road's a very tight, narrow road, you're making a significant right angle turn and turning into a driveway with a slope that's 10%. That's pretty significant. I wonder whether that combination of a tight turn and a steep slope really provides safe operation for an emergency vehicle responding.
I think I can answer that one, Chairman Hurley. the auto turn analysis that was filed last night, and I'll make sure that Chief Madden gets a copy of that, and as well as Attorney Cochran, does include an analysis of the fire vehicle exiting from Mergewood Drive onto Canton Avenue. Just to further add to that, with respect to the width of that road, my recollection is that that right of way is significantly wider than the paved width of the street. So if Chief Madden feels that it should be widened, that's certainly something that we could take into consideration. My recollection is that the street itself, the width of the right of way is 50 feet wide, and the actual paved street is significantly narrower than that. So there is room to widen that out if need be.
I think a turning radius analysis showing the width plus in relation to the slope. It's one thing to have a fairly flat entry to and from Canton Avenue. It's another situation to have an entry into the site using a very steep slope from Mergewood. That would strike me as a difficult maneuver for a large fire truck. But we'll leave it to the analysis.
Yeah,
and
on
obviously
that one,
we have a
Attorney
separate
Cochran,
question.
I'll just confirm with our consultant that his auto turn analysis does take into consideration the grading of the site. I think it does, but I'll confirm that with him. He's not on the call tonight.
Okay.
I
Obviously, a
think-
separate question whether they have a right to use that access, but we know that one's for the courts at a later date.
I think that the question here, coming from Canton Ave onto Mergewood and taking a left into the property, I think is that what you're talking about, Mr. Corcoran?
That's right.
Yeah, I think the training diagram shows exiting the property where, right.
Yeah, and I would guess that getting to the property and to the emergency would be the more important trip to consider.
Yeah, it just, any place where it shows us going into oncoming traffic, I was hopeful that they were able to make those corners a little softer for us, to make those corners a little bit easier to manage.
Got it. Thank you.
Excuse
So
me.
how are we leaving this issue? Mr. Schomer, you're gonna confirm some things for us?
Yeah, yes, I will. I'll speak to our traffic consultant as soon as we get off the call. I'll send an email to him to get confirmation on these. And if we need to submit an updated auto turn showing entry and exit from Mergewood, that's certainly something that we can do.
Okay,
Excuse me.
obviously, fire safety is a critical concern to the board members, and we want to be sure that to the extent possible that we address those issues.
As do we, certainly.
Anything else for the chief?
I have a question,
Okay,
but not for the chief.
okay. Chief, thank you very much. We'll look forward to getting some kind of a
No.
written communication from you as we've discussed.
No, oh, I'm sorry. We have an attendee, and I don't know if we're going to take attendees' questions regarding the topic right now, or we're going to take them all at the end.
Well, the chief's not going to be here at the end. Is it a fire-related question?
I have no idea, but
Okay, I think we'll take the questions at the end. So Chief, again, thank you for your sharing with us your insights tonight, and we look forward to receiving that letter from your office, and hopefully you won't have to come back again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope I was able to answer the questions that you have. And I know that, obviously fire safety is my utmost, importance, making sure that everyone's safe. And it's not even just fire safety, it's everything. So, the turning radius where we turn into oncoming traffic, that's just a minor motor vehicle accident, but it's still one of those things where, you try and limit that. So, you know, Mr. Schomer and his crew have talked on a couple of different projects. So he's been great to work with. So I appreciate his work towards this.
Great. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Schomer, I guess I'll turn this back to you.
Thank you. I think since we're already on the topic of infrastructure, I would suggest that we start with Phil, go back to Phil and have him talk about his updated civil plans and drainage, and then from there move into the design, the architecture, and the landscaping. Does that sound like an appropriate
fine.
course? Okay,
That's fine.
thank you. Okay, Phil, do you mind popping back down?
No problem at all. Happy to do it. Let me, again, with the chair's permission, I'll share my screen again to just bring up
That's
some
fine.
plans. And just confirming again that everybody can see the screen that's on now. Yes, okay.
We can see it.
I think Attorney Schumer has really put forth a lot of the building related changes, so I'll let the architect focus on them. But first and foremost, the consolidation and the relocation of the buildings really led to the looping driveway that came up through multiple conversations. And you can see that here on the revised layout map. We've dealt with the internal circulation in a more cohesive manner. We've also revised the Mergewood fire access lane, as I just alluded to with the chief, to address grading concerns, and we'll delve into that more deeply to address the chief's concerns and Attorney Corcoran's comments. The other two areas that I'd like to draw the board's attention to that were revised in this plan set is you'll notice that the central driveway has been relocated. We've pulled it more westerly along Canton Avenue. And that is being done to take advantage of the spacing between the two homes across Canton Avenue. So to better center that exiting movement, so it is away from those two homes relative to any headlight glare that may be seen or any intrusion that may be placed upon those two home sites. So we've relocated that driveway just in an overall better position and shifted the curvature so it aligns back up with the central corridor that was seen on previous plans. The other most notable element on the westerly side of our central site driveway is the board will notice this elongated circuitous sidewalk. And that is a direct correlation to concerns that were raised that we were not meeting accessibility code requirements. And I won't battle whether we were meeting them or not, or whether we were working within some parameters that are within defined codes. But by providing this sidewalk that is now no longer directly connected to the central driveway and elongating its shape and alignment, we're able to meet the 5% maximum code rating on a sidewalk. And then we're introducing two ramped elements to make up the additional grade that we have to get to the upper terrace of the site. And those ramps will meet all of the ADA accessibility codes, including slope and handrails on both sides, including landing pads. So we've incorporated all of those elements into the updated site layout plan. We've also, through the process, buildings 1, 3, and 5, which abutted the westerly sideline, those have been pulled away from the sideline of the property a little bit further. It helps defray some of the grading that takes place along there, but it just increases the separation of those buildings along that property line. And I will just advance a couple of slides here. A lot of what we have done on the civil site engineering side is infrastructure related and is really behind the scenes. And a lot of the discussion will take place once Sean Reardon from Tetra Tech has had an opportunity to weigh in on the site. But the first and foremost elements that we've taken into account on the behind the scenes element is the rear portion of the site, which was all previously porous asphalt with storage tanks underneath. That has been removed. As Attorney Schumer pointed out, we now have let's call it standard asphalt that you would see on a typical project with catch basins, drain manholes, and typical closed drainage piping that will then route the stormwater to an underground series of chambers. So underneath the pavement will still largely be drainage, but it will no longer be relegated to the porous asphalt that was perceived to be a potential maintenance issue, and also, should it fail in any way, potentially catastrophic to drainage runoff towards Canton Avenue. So that issue has been greatly improved upon. The subsurface chambers that you see on the plan, they're very shadowed out. It may be difficult to see at this scale, but we've also modified the technology that we're intending to use here. And that was at direct conversation with Mr. Reardon at Tetra Tech. We were using a product formerly known as R-Tank. We're now using StormTech chambers. They're plastic chambers commonly used for stormwater retainage. And we've now incorporated those across the entirety of the site. The other element that we've built into the plan, and I'm just switching screens and apologies, is Mr. Reardon asked us to try to minimize the amount of below grade stormwater storage that we have on the site. And we've done that to the best of our abilities here, where given the regrading and the relocation of the central driveway, we've taken opportunity to create surface basins. And these basins will, the easterly basin on the easterly side of the site driveway will receive runoff from our parking surface and a portion of our site driveway. And the westerly basins, these smaller basins that travel underneath our driveways, will receive runoff from our townhomes, townhome buildings 1, 3, and 5, via a stormwater swale constructed along the property line. And you may see it right along this property line. And again, some issues were raised, some concern was raised as to how runoff is treated behind these units. And by having the swale back here, we're ensuring that any water coming from this development is rerouted to an area that's collected and treated on site. And the ability to have surface basins, in Mr. Reardon's opinion, was quite paramount here, is that it increased the observable capacities of the stormwater systems on the site. Now, our underground infrastructure will have inspection ports. It will be observable. It is part of our operation and maintenance program that is submitted in the package of information that went to the board. But the open air basins just increase that observation capacity by having it completely open to the air to the best of our ability. We're limited in terms of not providing more because of the underlying water table conditions and the way the grading works on the site. But we feel that we hope the board will find these an improvement, and we hope Mr. Reardon will also find these an improvement from Tetra Tech. Inherent and associated with our ability to regrade the site and change the stormwater is really a relocated utility plan. And there's not much information necessarily to convey or go over here with the board this evening. But Mr. Reardon at Tetra Tech was quite importantly pointed out that he believed there may be some conflict with the utility routing that was proposed for the site relative to the stormwater systems that we have underneath the parking lot. And by realigning the site driveway, by readjusting the pavement, we're also able to realign and create these better utility corridors that you see on these site plans. It will allow for better long-term maintenance and certainly more improved constructability. And we'll certainly look forward to Mr. Reardon's opinion regarding that as part of the peer review. While we're looking at utility infrastructure, one of the items that was also raised through that review that we do want to clarify, and this certainly segues from having Chief Madden on moments ago, is all of the buildings on site are fully sprinkled. Previous iterations of the plans did not denote the sprinklers. These current plans do denote that we will have fire service connections off the main, and it really just promotes the developer's commitment to the fire safety that all of these buildings are fully sprinkled. And then lastly, what it affords us now, all of the relocation in total, and I think I'll defer to Verdant to discuss more on the landscaping, it's really created an opportunity that the landscaping has been redesigned to create more cohesive areas for community aggregation, better layout to the playgrounds and the community gardens, et cetera, in our dog park. And I'll let Verdant relay those over to the board. So that's it from a summary perspective, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, high altitude. If you'd like, I'm certainly willing and able to get into more detail if you'd like it this evening, or better served if we wait 2 weeks and we can respond accordingly to whatever Mr. Reardon comes up with regarding the engineering.
I think it would be better to wait, Phil, not only so that we can have Mr. Reardon's input, but give the board members a chance to actually look at these plans, which we haven't had a chance to do other than what we're seeing in front of us tonight. So
Completely
it would be-
understandable.
I think it'll be, and so that way, if we have questions, we can pose them in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So who's going to
There-
speak next?
From there, Mr. Chair, I think we'll go next to Tim Loringer from Embark.
Okay,
Everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Let me share my screen here. So most of the changes to can you see my screen here? The site plan? All right, great. So most of the changes to the kind of site layout and the access and circulation on the site have kind of been covered by Bill and Jesse in their brief presentation. So I'll focus more on the buildings themselves and the architecture. So the two most significant changes from the previous scheme relate to the amenity clubhouse and the larger central building in the center of the site. As you can see here, the red dash represents the previous footprints. And by combining these two stack flat types at the center of the site, we were able to connect those two dead end parkings to create that traffic loop. So this now remains a 3-story building as it was previous year. Kind of, you can see it's almost the same footprint. And we're able to get 36 units within that building. Still the stack flat typology. So all of the ground floor units have a private entry, and all the second and third floor units have these shared entries. You can see there's 6 stairs kind of around the perimeter of the building. So still no internal circulation. These are still larger units. We think that private to semi-private access and direct connection to the outdoors is very appropriate for the site. So the second major building change is with the location of the amenity clubhouse, which used to be kind of to the south side of the road here, directly adjacent to the abutter to the north of Mergewood Drive. So by flipping it to the other side of the street, we maintain that visual connection to the entry drive. So it remains kind of the most prominent building on site as you enter the site. It kind of greets visitors and residents of the site. And also, again, comparing it to the previous footprint of the townhouses that were previously here, we're now giving a bit more space to those specimen trees that we're preserving. And then you can kind of get into the layout of the area surrounding the building. But the consolidation of the programmed open space and outdoor amenities have now been they were previously kind of scattered throughout the site. And now they've been consolidated to kind of focus around that clubhouse and really use those existing trees as a focal point of the design. So overall, we were previously 116 units and 185 parking spaces. So those numbers have been maintained. So we have the same 1.6 parking ratio, 173 surface spaces. We still have the 12 garage spaces at the 3-story townhouses to the rear of the site, closest to the Winter Valley residences. The unit ratio is just about the same. There's been a small shift in there's 4 fewer 2 beds and 2 more 1 and 3 beds. So overall, the bedroom count is still exactly the same. We now have 36 townhouses and 80 stacked flats. So as you can see here, the townhouses to kind of the south of the entry drive along the entirety of the entry drive are 2 stories. We still have the 3-story townhouses at the rear. And now we have 5 separate stacked flat buildings. So 4 of which, the 4 smaller ones are all 2 stories and the largest one is 3 stories. Previously, the 2 stacked flats to the rear of the site, the one to the south was 2 stories and the one just north of it was 3. Now those are both 2 stories. So by consolidating the building at the center of the site, we were able to kind of reduce the density at some of the edges. And as Spilla noted at the townhouses here, we were able to pull those townhouses approximately 5 feet further from the property line. So we kind of, that consolidation allowed us to tighten up the site a bit. So just advancing some slides here. Here's just an axon from the northwest, so Canton Ave, just to the kind of bottom left of the screen here. So you can see those townhouses kind of along the more wooded area of the site here. the amenity clubhouse, and then those 5 stacked flat buildings with the taller townhouses to the rear. So again, all 2-story buildings around the perimeter of the site, except for those townhouses and that one larger building. And then from the opposite perspective, so this would be that connection where my mouse is. This is the connection to Merchwood Drive, the secondary emergency access, and then Canton Ave to the top left of the screen here. As you can see here, it's pretty evident in the aerial view here. One of the more, since we last presented, a lot of the basic outline of what we've done, we presented to the board a few weeks ago. But since our last working session discussion with Cliff, one thing we have done is kind of shift this building, relocate a little bit of the parking that surrounds the building so it's less of an island, and create that shift in plan that allows us to kind of break up the mass and introduce these pockets of landscaping on both sides of the building, which creates that buffer between the perpendicular parking and the units themselves that Cliff was speaking of in his initial report, and also just adds more vegetation and green space to the site. In terms of the typology of the buildings, we maintain the same style and types of buildings. So again, those 2- and 3-story townhouses, the 2- and 3-story stacked flat buildings, and that single-story amenity clubhouse. And then aesthetically, we're maintaining that transitional approach with traditional clapboard and vertical board and batten with asphalt shingle roofs. And then kind of having these traditional forms with more kind of refined, clean, modern detailing. So I won't go into every building type in detail just to keep this brief, but I will flip through them here. The general aesthetic of the buildings is generally we've maintained it from the previous design. So here's that first type A building, which was previously 8 units. It grew a little bit. We now have 10 units in there. We've started to incorporate portions of the aesthetic of the townhouses into it. So you have those gable roofs with the shed roof, with the combination of the board and batten siding with the clapboard siding. The type B kind of that 12-unit 2-story stacked flat that are now along the rear of the site, closest to the butter at 656 Canton, haven't changed at all. And then that larger building is kind of a combination. We previously had 2 of these 3-story 16-unit stacked flats, and this larger building kind of just represents taking those 2 buildings and kind of connecting them. So you don't, the shift in plan isn't really evident in the elevation here, as it's a very 2-dimensional drawing. But you can see just proportionally, we're keeping that 2-story proportion with the 1-story kind of third level as a different material that kind of picks up on the 2-to-1 proportion of the gable roof to the clapboard of the 2-story stacked flats. And the 3-story building will have the flat roof to minimize the height. We're accommodating mechanical equipment on the ground floor of all of the townhouses and 2-story flat flats around the perimeter of the buildings that can be screened with vegetation. And at the 3-story building, because we have those common stairs that provide roof access, we are accommodating mechanical equipment on the roof. So that can be screened. Right now, we're showing the overall roof height to the top of mechanical equipment. We're not showing screening because of the width of the building and the height of it. It won't be visible. And this is again a 2-dimensional drawing, but from a regular ground perspective, that wouldn't be visible from the ground. And then again, the townhouses that step with the grading, the larger 3-story townhouses to the rear of the site, the amenity clubhouse that again kind of steps into the grading. And then here's just a couple of internal site renderings. So here we are standing at the center of the site, looking north back toward the townhouses on the left, as you can see the stepping down the hill. One of the kind of centrally located 2-story stacked flat buildings, and you can see the clubhouse here off in the distance. And you can start to see the open space that surrounds that. That's going to a programmed outdoor amenity space that Natalie can get more into. And then looking from the same spot, but looking south, you can see again the townhouses along the south of the site here, and then that larger building. And that step-in plan is much more evident in this view. And as I was noting, the mechanical equipment at the center of the roof is not visible from the ground level. And then you can also see here at the end of the site how the vegetated open space here between the 2 two-story buildings that at the head of the road culminates in a nice vegetated area at the end of the drive here to kind of be a focal point when you're moving along the driveway. And then in terms of the context views, here's the just representing the existing view you have from Holmes Lane looking toward the site. This wouldn't have changed at all. We still have the site fence, the 6-foot site fence, the solid fence surrounding the site here to the north along Holmes Lane. That's offset a number of feet from the property line, which is already a number of feet inside the existing edge of pavement. So that provides the opportunity to provide some low plantings on the outside of the fence to kind of screen the fence itself. And then we're maintaining much of the existing more mature tree growth to kind of provide screening of the buildings. And then from Mergewood Drive near the existing driveway to the 652 property. Again, this kind of the view from this corner is also similar. The two stack flat buildings similar to where in the previous scheme, and now showing that emerged access drive as the traditional pavement and not the open paver system. Again, you can see the 3-story building kind of off in the distance, and the townhouses further out. And then I won't get too into detail on these, but we have updated the shadow studies. It's part of the drawings that were submitted because most of the buildings there wasn't a huge impact outside of the property line from the buildings because of their scale. They're 2- and 3-story in nature, and most of them didn't really change locations too much. So there isn't a huge change in the effects of the shadows. But this is the summer solstice here. Almost all of the shadows kind of maintain inside the property line, except for very early in the morning and then later in the evening. And even that is kind of toward the more wooded area where Winter Valley is. And then the kind of fall spring equinox. Again, minimal impact on the properties at Home Lane due to the fact that we kind of purposely pulled away from those specimen trees and use that space as the kind of open outdoor area, and then to merge with the south. So, and then the winter shadows again get a little bit deeper, kind of late in the afternoon in the winter, but because of the minimal range of the sun at that time of year, not much impact on the properties to Mergewood or most of the homestay properties. You can see only the latest, like 4, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, even escape the property line. So that is it for the architecture. I can, Natalie, if you want to pop on. Phil, Jesse, are we going to hand it off to landscape at this time?
Yes.
I can continue
Yes.
sharing and bring up her drawings, or if she has them queued up ready to go, I
Perfect.
can.
No, Tim, you do it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Just
Thank
let me
you,
know when you want me
Chairman.
to advance.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. I'm Natalie Adams with Verdant Landscape Architecture. I'm really excited about this plan. It's left us wonderful opportunities around the clubhouse and at the entry drive area. Tim, if you could zoom in at the entry drive, please. Phil had mentioned these surface basins, and we've really embraced these. We're going to be, our concept is the same as it always been, an eco country garden concept. And so we're going to be planting these surface basins and with ornamental grasses and other native plant materials, and as well as some boulders and stones. And that path, as you can see, the bus stop is right there at the drive, and we've left a nice generous space for the kids and parents to wait for the bus, and then the circuitous path that leads back up into up to the 2 ramps into the sidewalks. And the ramps will have, they'll be to standard double handrails both sides. And, going back down the path, we have some nice, interesting elements. What's not showing up on this plan, which we were a little, it's still in the process, is the lighting plan. So we're going to have lighting. The lights are shown on the drive, but they're not shown along this path. And we will have lights along the whole path for, because it's dark out this time of year, we're really going to need them. Tim, can you go to the next page? This next page is a new page. This is the tree protection plan. And, you know, there's a lot of information here. I'll let you all go through it. But what I think that's critical here is we're showing what a critical root zone is. And you'll see that on the details of the drawing. And we're also showing how that's defined, and that the landscape architect should be the one specifying, you know, what trees are to be protected, and they should be on site doing that. So this plan really shows what's going to happen before construction starts at all. So that defines that, and I know that the board was looking for something like this, and we had done this for Blue Hill Avenue or something very similar. This one's a little bit more in depth, but the details down at the bottom go through the signage, both in English and Spanish, and so it's a really solid piece. And Tim, could you go to the next page, please? Thank you. So this one, again, you know, you're seeing a lot of the same images because we're using the same eco country garden aesthetic. And I think one of the things here is this that's really gonna make the plan, and it's going to sound silly, but you know, this contemporary picket around the at-grade patios, because many units have ground floor entries. So we're having this contemporary picket around these entries, and all of these patios are pervious. So that's a huge plus for us. We love that. And while we're looking at this page, can you zoom into the amenity space, please? Tim, thank you. So right now, all our programming, a generous part of the program for the landscape architecture is going in around this clubhouse space. So we talked to the team, and we decided to put the dog yard over in the corner. And we wanted, you know, we didn't want to bring people in through the outdoor club terrace. You know, we wanted that exclusive. We didn't want any kind of any kind of dog that was a little fussy getting around the kids or anything. So we tucked that over there in the corner, and then you'll see out back, you're showing the natural play structures are among the lawn. And then if we move back from that, we're showing a nice pavilion so the moms and dads can stay out of the sun or out of the rain if the kids want to play in the rain. And then we have a nice generous terrace and patio, which we'll be programming with barbecues and tables, and a nice arbor that really says entry to the space. Can you go to the next page for me, Tim? The next page is the planting plan, and that really shows our plant materials. And, you know, I think everyone's seen this before, but it really embraces this kind of loose country garden aesthetic with some lawn space for open lawn play. But by all means, we're really trying to do this natural, ecological. And, you know, the more manicured gardens would be closer to the structures, but outside of that, we're really going towards meadows, stone walls, loose boulders that, you know, we have so many rocks on site that we can really reuse, rocks and boulders on site that we can really use. We're really excited about that. And the last page, is the lighting plan. And this is our old lighting plan. And I apologize, but you know, it's been a real push to get this all done, and the lighting rep is the last person to get the plans. So we're really using the same style of lights. We've chosen some different lights for the circuitous path that leads up, and a couple of different styles of lights for the amenity clubhouse. But you won't be surprised. We're following all the regulations from the town. There'll be no light trespass, and all of them are dark sky compliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes our remarks tonight. Our team is available for questions or anything you'd like to hear further from in greater detail. As the old phrase goes, my opinion in 25 cents will get you a cup of coffee, but I think this plan is looking much improved from the last iteration, and obviously a great change from what we initially proposed to you. So we hope you like it as well, and we hope that the peer reviewers are satisfied, and Attorney Cochran and his clients as well. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. And as I said, we'll look at the plans over the next 2 weeks and look forward to hearing what the peer reviewers have to say. And probably we'll have questions at that point. Does anyone else have any questions from board members? Mr. Corcoran? At this point?
No, I don't have anything tonight. We obviously have a lot of work to do to dig into the plans, and we look forward to continuing 2 weeks.
Okay.
I have two very quick questions, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
Great.
One, Mr. Schomer, my first question I think is for Ms. Adams, if she's still around, and it has to do with tree protection. Although I don't really care who answers it. You touched on tree protection a little bit, and I just don't understand what that means. I saw the circles around the trees on the plans, but can you just briefly expand on that a little bit? You know, are we talking about pre-construction, during construction?
That's right.
After that?
Yep, those are great questions, and one I think everyone should be concerned with. Trees are very important in our environment. So the tree protection plan is before construction starts. The site, the general manager and the landscape architect would walk the site, and they discuss where this protection fence would be going according to this plan you're seeing. This is where the and then once we're on the ground, we can kind of say, no, I need more space here, and for this tree is a little bit larger, we're going to need this. And so you really define where the fence, the construction fence, is going in order to protect these trees. And excuse me, if you look at the plan, they are not supposed to go within these boundaries. It is, you know, it's very strict. So that's what that chain link fence. So I'm proposing a 4-foot height chain link fence. I think 6 feet height, I see at a lot of construction sites. It's just too big and too imposing. Everyone knows they're supposed to stay out of the sites, this part of the site. There'll be signage everywhere. Although I might add that I think there's a note in there that only grading that's done by hand. Everything that is done inside this, in this zone, there's no heavy machinery allowed in this zone. That's what kills the trees, heavy machinery on their roots. Construction workers parking on tree roots is known to kill trees. So we're really outlining from the start of the project where this goes. Now, after the project is at a point of completion, we remove the fence, and then we work the proposed vegetation in with the existing vegetation, so it seems seamless. And we might overseed the top, and we might use some kind of landscaping machinery there, but all heavy machinery is not allowed in these zones. And so what you're seeing with the 8-inch DBH, that's diameter of the tree at breast height. So when you're standing, you know, you put your arms out, that's the diameter of those trees. And really anything less than 9 inches is very, most towns don't care about that. But I think, you know, when we walk that site, when we see trees we want to save within this zone, we'll be looking very closely at specimens that are worth saving in this zone, and there's just so many of them that we're really excited about. Some of these like big old beech trees, and that the Norway spruce group, and you know, some big old oak trees that'll really make an impact on the site, rather than just many new little trees. So you know, we're really happy to have these big trees, and we're happy to be part of saving them. I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you very much. Just a quick follow-up. Who makes the determination as to which trees are worth saving? And that's number one. And number two, who makes the determination as to where the fence goes? Is that just a standard, or are either of those determinations subjective in nature?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's really driven by the civil engineer and the architects, and what they need is space. And where the grading is going. And so from there, we, as the landscape architect, I say, you know, you're creeping in on the tree, we need more room. And they say, okay, we'll make these grades a little bit steeper. So when you see really steep slopes on the plan, you will notice that it's because we're trying to save a couple of trees. And so you say, why is that slope so steep? Well, we're trying to save those trees. We're trying to keep the weight of the soil off of those trees. Did that answer both of your questions?
It does. Thank you very much. I really
Okay.
appreciate it.
You're
My
welcome.
second question, if I may, Mr. Chair, is probably for you, Jesse, and it has to do with something that the chief mentioned, and it regards the gate onto Mergewood Drive. And I think the chief kind of mentioned offhandedly that the gate would require some ongoing maintenance, I think access and things like that. What does that maintenance look like and consist of? And does that maintenance require entry onto Mergewood for any reason?
I think I can answer that, and if I don't say anything, I'll ask Phil to stand and back up. But our expectation for this driveway access that you're seeing there is that it would be maintained to ensure that there's no snow that's piled on it, maintain it for ensure that that it's plowed. The gate itself would be regularly maintained to make sure that it's operational, and it, I believe, is under Knox box control, so that the fire department would have access to it in the event of their need to access the site through that entrance. Phil, anything else that you can mention on that?
No, you hit the nail on the head. The gate has a Knox box on it, so only the fire department can open it. We would obviously maintain a key on site for the sole purpose of opening it for snow removal purposes. That's it. We need to make sure that it remains safe and passable. So those are the two maintenance. Other than that, it's quite frankly standard asphalt, and there's not much for us to do.
Okay, in any statements regarding access to Mergewood required for the maintenance of that gate?
I would say for the maintenance of the gate, certainly not, because we could access it from the development side to make sure that it's operable. No reason to get onto Mergewood. Again, our
Okay.
sole interest lies in providing that solely for the fire department.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'll look forward to taking some of these issues up again in 2 weeks. Bill, I suppose we should have members of the public speak who have been waiting.
That would be good. Yep, that's Lara. Lara Roche.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can. Good evening.
Great, good evening. Lara Roach, 44 Holmes Lane. I have a few questions. The first being, the most recent, the landscape architect mentioned that there would be, she referred to a bus stop at the end of the driveway. And I'm wondering if there have been conversations with the police department and the school committee or the school board about the addition of that bus stop and whether that has been approved.
It's a great question. I do not know the answer to that.
Through you, Chairman Hurley, I can answer. We've not had direct conversations with the school committee. We have been in touch with the town department heads, DPW, and I believe the police department in terms of the effect of the project generally. I don't believe we've had any specific conversations about the bus stop. What I can tell you is that for a site like this, the bus service will not enter the site. They will pick up children on the street, and what they prefer to do is they actually stop in the traveled way because they don't want to pull off to the side, which could encourage cars to pass the bus. So what they'll do is they'll stop actually in traffic to stop traffic in both directions and allow children to get on the bus from there. And that's considered to be the safest way to handle that pickup of school children.
And has that been, I guess, with the traffic study, has that been taken into consideration then as well? If the plan is to then stop traffic on Canton Avenue, I assume both in the morning and in the afternoon during, pretty peak hours of traffic in this town.
So through you, Chairman Hurley, the response to that is the traffic study takes into consideration primarily traffic to and from the project site. It does take into consideration traffic that goes through and around the project site. But that's primarily during peak traffic periods, which may not necessarily coincide with the time that school children are being picked up or dropped off. That having been said, I will speak with our traffic consultant, and I have a number of items to speak with him to see if he has any further comments that he can make on that at the next hearing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, it's important to know that there are several schools in this area. So, there'd be several buses, I think, that would be stopping. And if you, come around this area during times in the morning and in that afternoon at those hours, the traffic is really bad. So to say that it's not peak in this area, I don't necessarily agree with that. So I appreciate if, yes, you could take that back to whomever is doing the traffic analysis, and potentially there could be more work done there. My second question would be regarding the groundwater mounding analysis and when we can expect, the results of that, if that has been started, and when we should expect to see some findings.
Through you, Chairman Hurley, the groundwater mounding analysis is underway, and we expect it within the next couple of weeks.
Thanks. And my other question would be about have any renderings been done 3D from the viewpoint of abutters? Because I think we've kind of went through this with the original plans when it was a 4-story. They said it was a 4-story building, but it was on top of a garage. So in reality, it was actually 5 stories. And I'm wondering if, we're in a similar situation here. We keep hearing 2- and 3-story buildings. However, we know that there's a substantial amount of fill that's being brought onto the site. So what's the actual height of these buildings, and what does it actually look like to abutters? Are we kind of looking up at this? Is it a castle, or looking up at this and we're just kind of at the bottom? So is there going to be additional drawings that show us what we're actually looking at? Because I think the reality is these 2- and 3-story buildings are actually 3- and 4-story buildings.
Through you, Chairman Hurley, if I may, the updated architectural plans, and Tim, if I don't mention anything, please add on. They do show a number of renderings from the perspective of neighbors' properties on Mergewood and Holmes Lane. Additionally, there are a number of what are called site section drawings, which compare the elevation of the site and the buildings to the surrounding area, including buildings on the surrounding properties. So I would encourage Ms. Roche to take a look at both of those, and perhaps at the next hearing, we can discuss those further if she has any further questions about those.
Yeah, I'll also note that, let me share my screen in here. The view from Mergewood represents pretty well what the impact of the fill would have on the heights of the buildings. Like, as you can see from where we're standing here, the eye level is just below like the window line. So even with several feet of fill here, as you can tell, the access road sloping up. Those 2-story buildings with the gable roof aren't going to appear like 3-, 4-, or 5-story buildings. You're only talking about another half level above. It's not something that's going to be perceived as being like a wall of building on the sight line. And in terms of any 3-story buildings, we very deliberately.
What about the other side?
Well, from the other side, I can get. Let me. Just to the point I was making about the deliberately the only 3-story building we have is kind of the most centrally located on the site. We wanted to keep the stack flats that are kind of along the edges here, particularly on the Mergewood side. To the 2-story ones, we actually reduced the height of one of them from 3 to 2 stories in the scheme. And then from the Mergewood, let me bring up a plan. Actually, it's the best way to illustrate this.
No, from the Holmes Lane side.
Sorry, I'm sorry. No, I meant Holmes side. Yeah. So with Holmes, so because we pulled back most of the buildings from that corner of Holmes, the only building that's really close, I would say, to kind of the proper there, and we're still a great. We're about 50 feet here. Is that 2-story one, and it is sloped up a little bit, but we
What's
very
a little bit,
intentionally.
though?
I think there's about 5 feet of grade there.
5 feet of grade. So that's close to an additional, what's an additional story? Is that 7 feet?
No, stories are like 10 to 12 feet. So again, like at the Mergewood view here, it's not going to be super perceivable. your eye height would still be above the base of the building.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, the whole point of the fill is to raise the site up, correct? So, I mean, to say that the site's not, you know, it's not going to appear risen doesn't really, that doesn't go with the story. I mean, the point is to raise the site. And so from a butter's perspective, it's going to be a raised site. You know, so I think whether it be a 2.5 story to 3.5 story buildings, they're higher than what they're made out to be. So I think it's important that, you know, that be acknowledged during these conversations, and we're not just continuing to you know, try to kind of brush under the rug that these are just, you know, straight 2 and 3 story buildings. That's not actually the case when you think about what they're on in terms of fill.
I think it's important to note, though, that unlike the original scheme, which was literally on a plinth, which was enough to get a parking garage under, so that was more like 10 feet. The few feet of fill here and there is less than the overall grading of the site. So if you're at the top of the site here, you're already significantly higher than you would be towards closer to the front of the site. So a few feet of fill isn't something that's going to be particularly perceivable when you're 50, 100, 150 feet away.
Okay. Tim, so are there, as Attorney Schomer, you know, mentioned, are there actual 3D renderings in your submission that show the viewpoint from neighbors? Because, you know, you can tell me to, you know, it's a little bit here and there. I can kind of imagine what it's going to be, but without those actual visuals, we can't, as abutters, we can't really get a good understanding of what we're dealing with.
Yeah, we have one from Mergewood where the connection is, then we have one from Homes here at the corner.
So that's the one from Homes right here that we're looking at.
Correct.
Yeah, but we can't. I can't see anything but trees. And are there going to actually, these are the actual trees that are going to be here, or are these just here for, you know, to make the picture look beautiful?
No, this is a fairly accurate representation of the trees. I mean, as best as we can do. And we can note on let me bring up the landscape plan here. If you note in the tree protection plan, which I just brought up, and you can see this, we're maintaining as many of these existing trees right along the property line as we can. And in addition to that, adding the fence, and in addition to the fence, adding the lower growth on the outside of the fence. So the idea is to kind of use use the shrubs to hide the fence, use the fence to hide the activity beyond it, and then use the existing trees that are already more mature and taller to kind of shield the 2 and 3 story buildings.
Okay. Well, I guess my ask is that if there are any additional renderings that can be done to, you know, to help us visualize, aside from the one that's, you know, halfway down our street here on the home side, and obviously on the Mergewood side, there's just that one as well. If there's any additional renderings that can be done to give us a better idea of what we're going to be looking at every single day since we live here and abut this property, it would be very much appreciated.
Okay, noted.
Is it, Mr. Schomer, is that doable? It seems like it should be.
I guess I would, Mr. Chair, I would ask Ms. Roche if she has any thoughts about what she's looking to see that this image that we're looking at doesn't show.
Well, I guess I won't speak for her, but it seems to me if we had something that showed what it was going to look like to people on Holmes Lane, which we don't have. We're looking out toward the trees, but if we could have a rendering that shows what people who live on Holmes Lane are going to be looking at post-construction, I think that's what we're looking for. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Chairman.
I would just add in, Mr. Chair, the Roaches live further into the lane, and they are directly opposite that 2-story building, which is well away from this view. There's nothing that looks broadside at that building from outside of the property.
Yes, this view is looking down at looking up Holmes Lane. It's not looking directly at the property. So Attorney Schomer, what we'd like is for this viewpoint to actually be rotated to the right and have potentially several others from different addresses on Holmes Lane, and not even just Holmes Lane, but also the other side, Mergewood.
Right.
Okay.
From the Kelly property, for example.
Yeah.
Noted. We'll speak up with the team and take a look at what we can do. You know, I'm a little hesitant because I don't, as it were, I don't think that that we can take requests and you know, because then at that point we're getting renderings from every single neighbor's perspective, which is, frankly, quite costly and time consuming to produce. These are fairly involved. But we can go back as a team and take a look at what additional viewpoints we can provide. So we'll commit to that.
And we can take that up at the next hearing.
Certainly. Yep.
Okay, thank you. We have are there other people who would like to speak?
Yes. Robin O'Neill?
Okay. Ms. O'Neill, good evening.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Great. My house with that picture, the last rendering of what the view will be like is from my driveway. And the large trees that are there don't exist in the picture that was shown. So I'm going to go along with Laura Roach and ask for more specifics and better drawings and renderings of what it's really going to look like from my house, because the larger trees that they're showing in that picture looking up Holmes Lane from my driveway don't exist now. There's some old hemlock trees that have been diseased and broken over years by storms and snow. So I find that image of what it's going to look like is not accurate at all with the fence there. And in addition to the fence, it needs to be pushed farther back into the property of the new development, because that we need to have some place to put snow. We can't plow the lane as is. But my bigger concern is the picture that was shown isn't accurately showing what exists now. And those trees, large trees that are portrayed, are not going to appear out of nowhere. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
thank you. Bev?
Yes. K-Raj?
Yes, hi,
No?
this is
Okay.
Kenny Roach at 44 Holmes Lane. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just had a question. Is the intent right now for these buildings to be fully sprinkled?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
I didn't see any fire protection line coming in off of the street in the utility drawings or any of that. I could have missed it, but okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay, we have one more. George?
okay, great.
George? Or maybe he stepped away.
Okay,
Okay.
and that's it?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess we will continue the hearing for 2 weeks. Our hope and expectation would be that the peer reviewers will have had an opportunity to carefully review the new submittals and be in a position to opine to the board and to assist the board in identifying any issues that they see with respect to this new set of plans. Hopefully we'll hear from Mr. Schomer and his clients as to where the groundwater mounding analysis is at the next hearing, because I think that continues to be an important piece of the puzzle. And hopefully we'll have some further information at the next hearing. But the way I envision the next hearing, obviously there'll be public input, but what I really see is the primary function will be to have the peer reviewers comment on the latest set of plans and identify for the board any issues or concerns that still need to be addressed, because that's really what their function is to do that. So I'll look forward to hearing from them. If there's any way for them to give us anything in writing over the next 2 weeks in anticipation of the hearing, that would be great. That may be a tight time schedule for them to do that, but in any event, I'll look forward to hearing from them in 2 weeks. And at the conclusion of the next hearing 2 weeks from tonight, we can see where we are in terms of the public hearing process. So anyone else want to add anything before we close out for the evening?
Just one question, Mr. Chair. In that process, what do you anticipate the opportunity for my experts to speak and provide input?
I fully expect that they will do so.
Thank you.
I mean, it doesn't have to be at this next hearing if they're not prepared to
Sure.
do that, but I certainly would welcome their input and their thoughts.
Great, thank you.
Chairman,
Okay, anything further?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
do we have to formally extend the date for closing the hearing now?
I mean, I think we had previously extended it to December 7th. So, Mr. Sherman, can we agree now on the record to what the extended date will be? I think you would suggest that something like January 21st, if I have my dates right.
It was January 11th, and that was noted in writing in my letter of
Okay.
submission yesterday evening. So that's
Okay.
formally
So
in the
for
record.
purposes of this hearing, we've all agreed that it's extended. The period for completing the public hearing process is extended until no earlier than January 11, 2022.
Yes.
Okay, Ted, does that address the issue for you?
Yes, I just wondered whether it had to be formally stated.
I'm glad you do that. Thank you. Okay, with that final little piece of business, we'll close the public hearing for tonight, and I'll look forward to picking it up again in 2 weeks. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating.
Thank you.
Okay,
Good night.
thank you.